Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And the lefties 0-1 pitch to Cal, swinging a drive deep into the gap in left center field. Going in. Goodbye, baseball. Cal Raleigh with another home run.
3-1 pitch. Swinging. There's a shot. Deep left center field. That's going to be a run. Goodbye. Halfway up in the bleachers in left center field.
And Teoscar, first ball, rips it toward the Crawford boxes. It's up and it's in there. A home run for Teoscar Hernandez on the first pitch of the top of the eighth.
With a 3-1. Ground ball, shortstop, backhand play made. Throw to the plate in the dirt and a great play. No, safe! Safe at the plate, says Adam back. Jose Herrera, the catcher, didn't have his foot on the plate. Well, the ball in the dirt. The Pirates take the lead 3-2.
It's got a chance. Gone. Patrick Wisdom does it again. Right over the center field fence.
Here's the pitch. This is lifted high, and it's hit deep out in the left center field. You can just hit goodbye. That is going to clear the bases. That's a grand slam, and the Angels have a 7-6 lead.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. Hi, I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. What's going on, DB?
Just trying to make it, man.
We haven't been here together in a minute.
Been a while.
Hello, friends.
About a week ago.
Yeah, almost to the day.
I think exactly to the day.
To this day.
No,
because we left on Tuesday, right?
Oh, that's right. You're right.
We left on Tuesday.
We left on Tuesday. It's been a long week.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
It's been such a long week. Like, I'm reading kind of fuzzy. Like, today feels like a day that's,
To this day.
especially somebody that's been reliant on being able to see things. It's a little hazy for me this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, like literally. I feel like now more than ever this morning, I need my readers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going after this
To go get more readers?
I can't find any. I feel I'm at a distinct disadvantage because I'm not seeing very well.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, it's like, so if you see me do this, it's mainly because I can't read.
Well, I know you can't read, but that's not going to help.
Wow. Picking up where you left off, I see.
Well,
I did say on Friday, man, I was genuinely, by the end of that trip, I was rooting for you. I felt like,
in what sense?
I just know you did. You felt you didn't feel good.
No, I really didn't.
And to watch that play out real time,
Yeah.
it was kind of tough. By the middle of the day, Wednesday,
Yeah, I was in bad shape.
and it totally it flipped at me. I was like, oh gosh, I gotta take care of this dude. Like,
Yeah.
where do we need to go? What do you want me to run and get? Like,
I
got you. I'll drop you off at the like.
I could see when you were like, we were sitting at the tables at the press, like for the main area press conferences, and you said something to me, and I did not comprehend a single word.
That's when I knew
said correctly.
That's how I knew you were in trouble.
Yeah, and then I saw like you flip, and you're like, "Oh, this is bad."
Yeah, it's not good. not good.
There was a point where I was like, if this doesn't turn around at some point, like at what point do I have to consider a hospital?
Yeah.
Like that's where I was.
Yeah.
But we rallied on Thursday.
That's what I said.
Yeah, we
I was
rallied
like,
on
you
Thursday.
could see you starting to come back to his normal self Thursday morning, but
Yeah.
you did leave all your snakes.
I did. I had to restock. I had to restock in champagne.
I didn't even know what was all in those bags, and I helped pack them. I'm like, Sasha goes, "Oh my gosh, he left his bag."
Yeah.
And I think did we call you?
You called me.
Yeah, I was like, "Hey, do you want that?" Because I didn't want to be, and I knew you were far away. But if you want me to hang on to it,
Yeah.
I was going to hang on to it.
And I was like, man, you can eat it or trash it, whatever you guys want to do.
I can't. I think it kind of got parceled through.
That makes sense. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. I don't know if it was all for you, but
Not really. I think the best thing that was in the bag, like couple months ago, that I would have eaten is probably the Cheez-Its.
Oh yeah, those are good.
Those are pretty incredible.
So
for what they are.
So,
but now I make my own.
Yeah, you make them with just straight up cheese, right?
Yeah, I told you my new little baby too. I put real bacon bits in there.
Oh
and
yeah,
I season them. Oh,
that sounds good.
Crack cocaine.
I would mess with those.
Yeah.
Crack cocaine?
They're fire.
Yeah, no, so when I'm like stockpiling low snacks, which like is a hoarding behavior, I understand. I'm mostly trying to
I mean, who doesn't spend $38 at a gas station?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, it was probably like total 38 over the stops.
What I didn't understand, though, and maybe it was partly where we were because it was kind of hood, but not super hood.
Yeah. I mean, we're by the airport, like you can imagine.
And
our hotel's by the airport.
Well, getting the stuff through a glass.
Yeah. That's a sign that you're like, I might not be in a great neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was like sliding the bags under the counter. But to watch you struggle with all the stuff, I was like, here, can I just, it's giving me it's making me a little.
Well, I didn't want to,
So can I just bag that for you? Because to watch you struggle with handfuls of stuff.
I didn't want to sit there and like hold up the line by bagging it at the counter there.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, we'll figure this out later.
Do you remember seeing old boy on the bike that was probably looking for a place to live that was kind of sitting by my side of the vehicle?
Yeah.
And I wanted to start the truck before you got out. And I left my passenger side open while I walked around to put my hand on the pedal and hit the button. Sorry. And I could, there were some things going through his mind.
He was like, man, I could just hop right in there.
I'm childish too. And he was like kind of pedaling away real slow looking at me. And I was like, it'd have been a passenger side. You still can't drive.
You're not getting anywhere.
That's what I was telling you, like he's paying attention to what I'm saying. But I just felt it necessary to share with him. He seemed like a nice man.
Yeah, no, it was. I do have this. So when I'm getting my road snacks, I'm honestly focusing more on like, okay, if I have this type of low blood sugar versus this type of low blood sugar, what will work?
Yeah.
So like, it's not generally not like I try and get my best preference that fits in that category, but it's generally not
like there's a difference between sour cream and cheddar ruffles and lemon cookies.
Yeah. So there's like hey, things are going down quickly. I need like quick, simple sugar versus like, hey, we're on a little bit of a downhill slope here. Like, let's get some carbs in to make sure we start popping back up. Like there's like emergency versus like, hey, we should probably take some kind of action here. So I'm generally trying to fit something in like those categories. And so it's not generally what I'd be like, oh, this is just what I want to eat. And honestly, like you saw, I didn't eat most of it.
Yeah, I know.
It's just if you've ever had a really bad low blood sugar and not had access to stuff, it like changes the way you think.
Did you ever eat the sandwich from that restaurant? From the
part of it.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Dude, that place was.
Yeah.
What was the name of it again?
Checkered Flag in Indianapolis.
Pretty good little hole in the
wall. It was, yeah.
I was scared.
Yeah,
scared's kind of a harsh.
When we pulled up, I was like, this is not what I had pictured.
Me neither.
It was definitely one of those where you walk in and you're like, oh, we're not regulars. And they are used to people who are regulars.
Certainly that don't look like me. That was incredible.
That's not true. We had closer to one that looked like you than one that looked like me.
Who?
The guy that got takeout.
Oh, yeah. But you see what he did.
Yeah, he got out.
I said, oh, that's a bad sign. He got that to go. Didn't say a word to anybody. Came in, got his bag, and bounced.
Yeah.
The creativity in the menu was.
No, the menu was incredible.
Was incredible.
Which you don't generally get that much creativity in a place like that.
Yeah.
Like you might get good food, but they usually aren't super kind of off the beaten path type choices.
I remember Concert Chris found a spot in Chicago that had like a skull and a motorcycle on the roof in Chicago. And I wasn't all that excited to go in there either. But at least I knew we were closer to diversity than not.
It's exciting.
And the food was incredible there too. So I've learned that a lot of times that's where the good spots are. And typically I'll roll the dice.
Yeah.
Although I remember Brett and I, we were driving down to Fayetteville, Dickman. And there was this spot that I wanted. We stopped. The gas station was amazing. It was like newly built, but right next to it was kind of this rundown shack. It had banners, not banners and a chalkboard to advertise, not
like signs.
No.
Yeah.
no real in the ground signs. So I was like,
okay.
But there was this big fried chicken banner, and it smelled amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, do I?
Gonna risk it for the biscuit.
I looked at him. He's pumping gas. I'm like, nah. I looked at him. I was like, yeah, I ain't going over there.
I'll be honest.
I mean, because in the gas station, they were, just to let you know,
yeah,
they had an aisle of MD 2020 and Boone's.
Okay.
And I'm like, yeah, but no.
Like a full aisle?
Yes.
There's that many, or they
Yes.
just had it that stocked?
It looked like the United Colors of Benetton for the MD 2020 on the bottom row. But again, it wasn't people that looked like me. So we're crossing.
Yeah.
It's a socioeconomic thing, but it wasn't poor black people. It was poor white people.
Yeah.
So I was tempted because I'm telling, I can remember the smell. Like that's the one. As you can see,
you've got a crazy nose.
Yeah, it's like a goddamn hound.
Yeah, it really is.
What
are you talking about?
It has its drawbacks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The smell of that fried chicken haunts your dreams.
Yeah.
I am way more likely to take a chance on a place that I'm like might be a little sketch in the city versus like rural.
That was pretty rural.
Yeah. That's just my comfort zone is a little more urban than rural.
Yeah. I mean, Brett's a big fit guy, but man, I don't know.
Yeah. You might need to roll more than a couple deep in there.
Well, I just watched too many movies.
I know, me too. Like probably nothing's gonna happen, right? Like in all likelihood.
So immediately when we walked into the place in Indy, you know what goes through my mind? I'm just gonna give you a
freaking bats.
I didn't want anybody in there to. I'm like, hey, don't be mad at me. I am not with these ladies. I don't want to hear it. We are working colleagues.
I say we are work acquaintances.
Did you notice how I sat as far away from him as I could get at the table?
Yeah, like we sat next to each other.
There was
on one side.
There was gonna be no misunderstandings,
no confusion.
Because the three guys at the bar are looking at me like,
yeah, just the heads whip around. They're like, we don't know them,
and just kept staring.
Yeah,
I was like, oh boy,
yep,
oh boy.
No, I know. I had my head on a swivel. I was.
Sasha and I were fighting over who was going to have their back to the door. I go, it ain't going to be me.
I don't like having my back to the door in places I know. Like that's a thing.
Yeah.
My wife always waits to sit down because I'm like very particular about where I sit.
But once I saw the two big smokers outside, and I could it.
You could smell it as soon as you walked in the door.
Like good. And Shane, your doppelganger, sans the hair on top, was a cook back there.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah, Brad. I'm telling you, Shane. Except he had like some muscles, kind of, but he was an itty bitty guy.
Sounds familiar.
Same rims. He was bald. Did he not? We should have taken a picture.
No, he did.
It'd have been so obvious.
He did look like
he looked just like you. It was incredible, and he appeared to be good at what he did. Although the smoked stuffed meatballs.
Just a tiny bit overdone.
A little dry, but everything else.
Tiny bit over. It was good food though.
It's amazing.
Really good food. You
got some lamb chops in Chicago too. So
the lamb chops were really good.
Did you post that picture?
I haven't. I will.
They were
cooked perfectly.
So you know how I enlarged the screen just to see if I could see the seasonings.
Yeah.
Man,
there was like a little crust on the backside.
I could see
it was good. It was incredible.
That's a death row menu.
Lamb chops?
Yeah.
Those were
top three. Although they don't do that. Can you still get a last meal?
I think so. I don't know.
I know a couple of people like
I've been on death row recently.
I see you're fully back. A couple of people in Texas abused it, so then you have to get. I think you have to get like approved or something. But
yeah, listen, if they're still turning the lights out, they better feed you first.
You ever seen Law Abiding Citizen?
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. Gerard Butler, Jamie Foxx,
big Gerard Butler guy.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were going to say you're a big Jamie Foxx guy.
Why?
Stephen Willie Beeman.
It's okay. He's okay.
Yeah. Not a big Ray guy.
Nah, it's fine. Like
Django.
Almost did make it through that movie.
Really?
Yeah. There's probably 3 times I was about to shut it.
Shut it down.
Mm-hmm. That and A Hateful Eight. Two movies that I own. Like I had to really like. Okay.
Hateful Eight's a little bit of a struggle to get through.
It's
a little bit.
Yeah. So, but I made it. Definitely not a movie I'd watch again.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha.
You know, that was just one you just cross off. And you're like, oh.
It's probably a different experience for you than it is for me.
Like on your playlist, looks like we made it. I made it through and I moved on.
I will say, and I promise, guys, we will get to Nebraska's big recruiting weekend. We will get to all of it.
Are we?
Yeah, at some point.
Shane had a tremendous get because, like him or love him, he's polarizing.
Mike Farrell.
As we got the Godfather, Mike Farrell.
That's right. We'll talk about
who always has thoughts.
Yes.
On Nebraska and Matt Rule.
And I've got some big picture questions about Nebraska recruiting, like outside of this specific weekend and even maybe this specific class.
This is on the heels of Terry getting to Lincoln today.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you guys got?
He wasn't part of the weekend crew, but he's in today. Had another 25 or something in this weekend, including David Sanders. Mosey was there as well. Some highly touted guys, a bunch of 26 and 27s as well.
You think more of a hey, did your guy is pretty photogenic? Pierce.
Muberry, yeah. No, he's
a nicer looking person that plays different on the football field. He looks like he'd just be such a nice person.
Yes, and he plays with some bad intentions.
Yeah, dude's pretty mean spirited.
He comes downhill with some bad intentions.
Yeah, big
with some malice in his heart for sure.
I like that.
No, yeah, there's a huge recruiting weekend. We will definitely get to that. But I will say I made a mistake because for you guys don't know, they dropped me off in Champaign after Indy, and then I went up to Chicago for my anniversary. I did make a mistake though. I did not give myself a buffer day after coming back from vacation.
It's hard.
It really is.
Yeah. So I didn't eat Thursday night until 9.
Yeah.
So I really didn't ramp down and turn right around.
And did Friday morning
to be back here. Those aren't. Yeah, that's not ideal.
We got back about 9:30 last night, and then I started working on the show. So yeah, it was a little bit of a late night, late turnaround, but gotta have the buffer day. That was a mistake, but
team buffer.
Yeah,
loading. Did you get into any of the Olympics?
Oh yeah, I was. We spent.
I'm super Natalie and Brulia.
You're torn.
Yeah. Some things I like, some things I don't.
I mean, there's obviously some things that I don't love, but it's also I'm kind of willing to overlook it because it's the Olympics, and I'm just like, hey,
Ravi Lulla here for grace.
Only not often.
Got that right.
Fudge. It's a challenge.
I wish we could release the video in its entirety of you cussing at me mercilessly.
I mean, I know
for
that
3 straight minutes.
I know Hurrdat Sports can't. I don't know if I can't. I mean, it's my own personal, content.
Absolutely.
That meltdown was incredible.
I wasn't a melt. It was more of a rant than a meltdown. I wasn't like actually mad. I was just giving examples.
You're mad.
I was so taken aback at how clever and quick it was. That I forgot it was directed at me.
But I wasn't like swearing at you.
Kinda.
Not really. I was just discussing different ways in which if you chose to swear, you could use those words.
Right.
I was trying to help.
Right.
You said you were running out of adjectives, and I was like, I got a bunch for you.
Yeah.
We'll see. I might talk to the boss, see if I can release that on my personal account.
To this day.
Oh my goodness. It may not even need context.
Yeah, I don't think so. It was
because
I thought I was gonna lose both you and Sasha.
Well, you're right. I was running out of criticisms. Like, well, if you cuss, you'd have a lot more available to you.
It's true. It's versatile.
It's like, wow. But and we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but you know what's funny? And so you know that it worked.
What's that?
And even our man TK, I think he either texted or it was in the street. No, I think it was text. He texted me and he's like, he's all in on Signetti. And I don't know how dialed in you were because he was you were still just kind of coming around.
Yeah.
But his bravado and his brashness was one of the weird under the rate. I mean, it's Indiana, right?
Yeah.
But because it's Indiana, I think that played well.
That's kind of why it
with
resonated.
his personnel. Yeah. Because I asked a couple of coaches that were there. They're like, well, what's he got to lose? It's Indiana.
Yeah.
So that was quietly.
Yeah, like go big. What's the hurt?
One of the things that I liked. And then the other thing is Coach Moore, Michigan. Man, the standard is definitely the standard.
Y'all in?
Yeah, people forget he's a big guy.
Yeah.
And he has that, because what I did on the way is I played the media days through media.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm watching it as it's charging in the port.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're listening to all the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did
on the way back.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm like, this is probably boring, but
meh.
I mean, everybody else is like being productive in the back seat.
So you might, I might as well too.
do you know no one sat in the front seat?
Yeah. We said it was gonna be like a driving Miss Daisy situation on the way back.
It's incredible. I had my backpack up there with a bag. I had drawn the face on the paper plate. I was gonna put it on top of the backpack.
Yeah, you don't want to get lonely up there.
I was like, but I did talk to my bag from time to time. I was like, hey, do you need anything over there? You good? It's incredible.
So TK says Kurt Cignetti is Deion if Deion was an actual coach with a track record of consistent winning.
Maybe
in terms of
it was TK. Yeah. It was.
I'm a big Cignetti guy.
You too?
Well, I liked his work at James Madison, obviously, and then our guys over at Matrix Analytical backed that up with their numbers. They were super high on Cignetti. They love that hiring at Indiana, and I don't know. I have kind of a soft spot for those types of guys that get their chances. You know, like I'm still waiting on Chadwell to get like I don't know how somebody hasn't given a shot to Jamie Chadwell yet at a P2 level.
P2.
Or even at a P4 level, you know, like there's tiers to this thing. I get that, but you're saying nobody like Duke couldn't have used Jamie Chadwell?
I know.
You know, like that nobody's like, yeah, maybe we get that guy who's been really good with almost nothing.
Who did you feel?
I get he's got stuff now at Liberty.
Oh,
but
minute 13.
Yeah.
I can. This is what I got to do.
I can't read.
So I'm telling you, like, if you could feel what I feel, it's a little.
No, I know.
It's giving me palpitations because I'm not. My sight is a blur.
Yeah,
it's a legit blur. But anyway, if there was a takeaway, what players did you feel were represented most how their coach was?
Oh, Nebraska.
Oh, that's the easy one. I should have said that.
Nebraska's guys are like lockstep.
I agree. I should have thought. That's wow.
I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer to me.
That's kind of mad at myself.
Who did you have?
Penn State.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
Penn State.
That makes sense.
Their confidence.
Yeah.
Those guys think they're pretty good.
I think you probably have to play for a guy like James Franklin.
Not even like Oregon. Like I thought it was Penn State.
Yeah, I think there's certain types of personalities that if you're going to go play for them, you better be in lockstep.
Yeah.
Like I would bet. Like I think that about Colorado. I think their personalities reflect their coach pretty similarly because you have to think that way in order to go play for Deion.
Quietly, I'll tell you who I'm a fan of on the other side, just because of their ability to communicate and give us an insight in their program.
Coming up next, we've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and, of course, wherever you get your podcast. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We do have lots and lots of recruiting stuff to get to. We also have a few things from Big Ten Media Days that we want to tie up loose ends on as well, because you were talking about being a big fan of Sharon Moore, but some of the players had some interesting things to say as well, I thought.
Yeah, I thought I really fell in love with Donovan Edwards.
Yeah.
Just because I love when people that accomplish things at a high level can go back and are self-aware enough to let you know, like, this comes with a price. There are some struggles there. And for him, it sounded like he was kind of just describing these bouts of depression and where he should be and should he be there and how his teammates lifted him up. I thought he was amazing.
Yeah.
And just to give you some insight, because what we do is, he's got 315 yards in the first 4 games or whatever last year. And I'm like, I don't know about Donovan Edwards. It's like, does he need to get into a rhythm? Is it this? Is it that? And meanwhile, there are so many, which I know because I've been through that myself.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, just because you roll tape on Saturday and you see a guy out there doing something, you never know how he got there or what's going on while he's there, which is very much why I'm pro being other-centered with athletes, because I just don't come down on them, because usually it's something other than what we see, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I was just reading through, speaking of the Olympics, just the piece on Jordan Larson.
Yeah.
And immediately I made the connection between performing at a high level and it seemingly being one way versus the reality of what's going on in the other. I had to tell her, I'm like, just the encouragement from reading through that, because some of those things, you don't know them all. Just the ability to put it out there, and to be vulnerable. It's like you feel like, and I encourage you to go. It was through ESPN.
Yeah, the Jordan Larson article.
Amazing insight in terms of what she's been through, both personally and professionally, and how intertwined they are.
Yeah, it's an article on ESPN.com by Aishwarya Kumar, and she, goes into Jordan Larson's story.
She had
pretty intensively.
She had a line in there about, you got to read it, but basically, she's had some things that she's had to overcome from a love standpoint in relationships, and a couple they may be seen as not very successful, right? How they ended. And she just said, just the ability to talk about it. Sometimes saying it out loud helps her cope, or maybe just using the words, it's her way of running from it. And I just was like, oh,
yeah,
it was just deep.
Well, and I always appreciate, you mentioned
go back and check out Edwards too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You talk about kind of the ability and willingness to just say it out loud, right? Because that's a lot of, a lot. First of all, we do this thing, like you said, where we think about athletes in sort of the context of the tape or their stats or whatever the box score is, and we don't really understand, or we don't consider the fact that, hey, there's all these other things that have nothing to do with football or volleyball or whatever that are likely impacting this person's performance right now. Because, and that's true, because it's the same thing that happens to everybody else when they go to work and they're dealing with something, right? Every single person, whether you're in sales or HR or whatever, or what we do, when you have personal issues, that can't help but impact one way or another, good, bad, or otherwise. But it is a factor in what you do for a living. People aren't these little compartmentalized boxes, but for some reason, and I'm guilty of this too, we do that with athletes. We're like, oh, this is the person that's an athlete, and then the rest of their life is over here, and this is their sanctuary, so they're able to block everything out. It's like, no, they're people.
And we don't treat it like that either.
No.
We assess it,
yes,
and critique it like that. But we don't allow them to just be that either. We always get into the other stuff in a speculatory fashion,
especially
right?
Especially when it fits whatever narrative or whatever that we want to.
Oh, Adrian Martin, he's not pushed in practice. That's why he's gained 12 pounds, and he's lazy, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're just bottom lining this. There's you could go on and on and on and
well,
on.
I mean,
on. It's like
the best example I can think of is Buster Douglas, right? We got Terrence Crawford coming up this week. We're on the 1-year anniversary of the Errol Spence knockout, right? It's big.
Can you believe it's been a year already?
No, I can't, because I still see Errol falling all over the canvas in my dreams.
My guy Kevin, he's just like, man, just saw Madrigal. He's a big boy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
But
allegedly he can walk around at 170.
Whew. Buster Douglas is this supremely talented fighter,
78,
who never puts it together, right?
Yeah.
Never puts it together. His mom dies before the Tyson fight. It's the only time in his life he gets his boxing career together. Beats the biggest upset of all time in almost any sport, I mean, you're in that neighborhood, and it's like those two things are directly connected.
Mm-hmm.
His mom passing and him beating Tyson are inextricably connected. If his mom doesn't die, he probably gets whooped by Tyson.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real about that. Those two things, and when it's a positive, we're like, oh, isn't that great and inspirational? But what if he was in Tyson's shoes? What if he was the guy that was supposed to beat the brains out,
and then
his mom died?
Conversely, he tells the story of coming down off of that.
Yeah, he was never the same again.
Yep.
He never had that level of motivation again.
Just couldn't channel it. So,
but when it's negative on the other side, we don't like to consider those things.
Yeah.
When it's inspirational and positive, we're like, oh, look what they overcame. It's like, it's not they overcame. That's the reason they succeeded, like in certain instances. And then it's the same thing on the other side. If it had gone the other way, it probably would have been the reason for that too. But we don't like talking about that part of it.
No. I would encourage, excuse me, anybody that is a fan of rooting for people and authenticity, and like go check out the article with Jordan Larson.
Yeah, I'm a fan when people let us or take us there with them, right?
Yeah.
Being real.
Some of that is the beauty of the interviewer too, to get that.
Yes.
Because that's a skill, right? We hear it all the time. Well, such and such is better with you, or the other person didn't get that out of them, or sometimes it's the people that they're around that allow for that level of peace.
Yeah.
And kind of disarming in their comfort. I like to think, now he's pretty good with everybody. So yeah, but I do think we have a little more grace and ability to like connect on a different level. Like, let's say if we're talking to Coach Rule, then
yeah,
like he's not going to get inside. He's not going to get into Inside Out too, in the dynamics of that with just anybody, right?
Yeah.
But there's a certain disarming portion of that, because when he's talking about the things that he's talking about with dealing with emotions and compartmentalizing and playing with emotion and having passion
without being emotional,
like to bring that back to athletics and performance, it's like, hey, how do we win these close games? How do we stay within ourselves in the fourth quarter? And he's like, be emotional-less, not emotionless.
Yeah.
Play with passion, play with grit, play with toughness.
Care about what you're doing.
Without allowing it to dictate your behavior.
Yeah, to make you emotionally.
And I was just like, that's like life 101.
Because I didn't understand, because he was talking about it, and I didn't understand the distinction. And I was like, please explain.
Yeah.
And then he goes into that, and I was like, oh, that was perfect.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, that makes total sense.
Right?
Right? Like, if I'm a kid and he's telling me this, I'd be confused. I'd be like, hey, how do I play with emotion without being emotional? And then he tells me that, and I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Like, that was
like, he broke it down so simply.
And I think we said this on air. That was of course, he said it better than I could explain it, but that was the whole processing of a Deion Sanders press conference, right? It goes through a filter.
Yeah.
But whether we allow being emotional about how we feel about him dictate what he said, that was the difference, right?
Yeah.
It's like, can I process this information just for what it is?
Yeah.
Or am I emotional because of how it made me feel, so I can't think straight?
Sure.
Right? And fourth quarters and winning close games, man,
it's all about keeping your head on straight.
God, there's a lot in there. This is life.
Coming up next, we'll wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on Hurrdat Sports Radio at the Pillar Exterior stage. I think it might be time to jump into some recruiting, which it does. You know, we were talking about Coach Rule and his conversation with us on Wednesday, and he did talk about the emotion versus emotional in the context of recruiting.
Yeah.
And how
he does.
He brought up Rayola as an example. Obviously, they always wanted Dylan Rayola, right? They always wanted him to come there. It looked like it wasn't going to happen. You can be disappointed without letting it affect. Like, what are you going to do? Just sit there and not go get a quarterback then? No, you got to go get a quarterback. You got to go complete your recruiting class. Like, you still have a job to do, right? You can be upset about what happened. You can have emotions about what happened. But you can't be emotional in how you move on from what happened.
How about you want a little hidden one that we just take for granted?
What's that?
Now, you and I, excuse me, aren't probably mature enough. But unless you respect Donnie Rayola for what he is as your offensive line coach, how easy of it do you think it would be for him to feel some type of way about Donnie?
You couldn't even get your nephew to come here?
Or, hey, man, can you give him a call?
Yeah, like, hey, help us out here. Like, how?
Just little normal things that people that see each other every day would say to one another. where you have to stay in line and respect boundaries.
Yeah. And value. That was the thing.
I mean, that would be just imagine.
That'd be really hard.
And I was joking with him. I think I said this out loud. But I remember what he told me.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Hey, we're going to wish him the best. I want him to go, ball his brains." I'm giving you the PG version of what he said real time. And he said, "You know what? We're going to take a run at Dayton, and we're going to recruit him just as hard, and take our chances there."
Yeah.
And I just was like, I wonder, how easy it would be to just like side eye.
Yeah.
Donnie.
Well, not just Donnie, but also, so that whole situation was weird, I think, from the outside, because everybody thought, well, after what the offensive line looked like in Donnie's first year, that he was only being retained to try and get Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of people thought Dayton was only getting offered to try and just keep Dylan happy or to be nice to the family or whatever. And it's like, no, they genuinely, and we're seeing it right now with Donnie, right? They genuinely believed he was the best guy for the job.
The ability to not be emotional is allowing that relationship to pay dividends. That's emotional maturity.
100%. Because now, not only do you get huge improvement first year on the offensive line, you've got guys that we wanted to drive to the airport to get out of town that we were desperate come back this year in a Bryce Benhart. We couldn't kick Bryce Benhart out of town fast enough.
I know it.
And now we're like, oh, God, is he going to the NFL or is he going to come back?
I know it.
Like, that is the difference in those two. Like, yes, offensive scheme, overall head coach, but like Donnie Rayola is the difference there, right? All of a sudden, Turner Corcoran's been a little maligned as well. We're like, maybe we don't love him at tackle, but like, oh man, if he can play guard, we love this guy. It's like, you didn't feel that way a year ago.
Yeah.
And
it's like I said, if that guy was in the portal, you know how highly coveted he would be?
Yeah, you know how many dollars he would get?
It's like, I don't know, but I like that whole.
And then we haven't even got to the recruiting part with Donnie yet, right? The Lance Grant Bricks last year, we seem to have forgotten that already.
Shoot, he almost pulled Scholl.
Yeah.
From Auburn. Now it's like, wow.
You've got David Sanders, who.
How about all the relationships he's having to surpass that had head starts on him?
That's what I mean. People thought that the original visit was like a courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, Nebraska might be in this thing. And now it's down, most people believe, to Nebraska and Tennessee. Like, Nebraska is dead in this thing for the best offensive tackle in the country. You think that happens without your offensive line coach being pretty good at what he does?
Yeah.
I don't think so. And not to mention all the other guys that they've landed in this class in the last class. You know how quickly he's restocked that room?
I said it the other day, and I didn't think about it until he actually revisited how he wanted to use the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the occasional fill a hole, plug a gap. Maybe if there's a guy on the open market that could help him immediately, they would take a look. But he said, I don't want to get in the habit of having guys that have been in the program 2-3 years with this emotional investment and attachment to say, hey, I need to replace you.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds good, right? Sounds
great.
Sounds great. What's the reality of pulling that off? So,
well, the reality of pulling that off is you have to do your work with those guys in those 2 and 3 years so that you're not having to constantly plug holes.
You know what the reality of pulling that off is? Go look at the roster.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is almost exactly what he's talking about.
100%.
I may need to go get a guy here.
Mm-hmm. I went out and got Mazuka.
Okay. Just to help with time. But for the most part,
I went out and got Ben Scott last year.
I can build on my depth.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done it in a year and a half. A year and a half.
He's
already in on 2026 and 2027 quarterbacks.
You know how long it took that? Just for an example here. Offensive line, I think, is the thing that takes the longest to rebuild.
Yeah.
It took Florida State like 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Mike Norvell was about run out of town in year 2.
How many times do we talk about the offensive line potentially and not even bring up Mazuka or Jacob Hood?
Never. I have not heard a single person talk about Jacob Hood.
Or we, right, wrong, or indifferent, we use Corcoran as like an afterthought.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, if we can slide him in somewhere, that'd be okay.
It's like,
It's like that guy's got like 100 starts.
I said this just because I wanted people to understand during this year's spring game. I said, you guys remember a year ago, we couldn't even really have the spring game because of the offensive line.
Because they weren't sure they'd have 5 guys.
A full year later.
How many did Ben Scott? What did Ben Scott say?
Our 2 deep is insane.
Yeah.
I don't have to believe it. They got to believe that.
They're going 10 deep.
I'm like,
not to mention, we haven't even talked yet about a bunch of the guys they brought in last year. At no point in that 2 deep was Grant Bricks' name mentioned, ever. At no point. I mean, I think the only guy in the last 2 classes that got brought up was Gunnar Gatula
and Sledge.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you got a couple guys there. You got a couple more on the way. I haven't even brought up Hammerbeck, who's another 4-star that they already locked down in this class. Like, that is all because Matt Rule was able to take Donnie Rayola for who he was and what he was good at and separate that emotionally from what Dylan Rayola's decisions were.
I wish I could remember verbatim, but I remember gist of the conversation we were talking about with Coach Rayola and kind of like what was the aha factor. And he said, do you know how rare it is to hire someone that you don't know, that you don't have to teach your philosophy to, that is already in lockstep with how you
mean Rule's philosophy to Donnie
and coaching O-line.
Yeah. And kind of the way they operate,
he goes,
too.
He said, I knew right away.
It kind of...
I knew right away. And I was like, again, not being emotional.
Yeah.
Because you guys kind of admitted out loud, you and Sat met with kind of every intention to move on.
Yeah.
But you allowed yourself as a person that's emotionally mature.
Yeah. To be
open.
Yeah. To the possibility of like.
It didn't have to be a certain way because that's what you thought about ahead of time.
And you didn't.
I think that's amazing. We can't even do that in our day-to-day life.
And you didn't allow the clamoring of the state saying there's no way that Donnie Rayola can be the only guy we retain from the last staff.
We're so bad. If we wake up in a bad mood, everything's bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. Yeah. That's, or, somebody says something to us. And so the whole rest of the day, man, it's like, that's what we probably.
Now you're sideways the rest of the day.
It's admirable at worst.
Yeah, no, it's incredible at best. Like it's a skill set that has allowed, like we said, it's allowed them to remake the offensive line in basically a year and a half from a point where nobody felt good about it to remember everybody takes it for granted almost.
Remember when we thought Judy was overrated?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that too.
I think they think he's pretty good now. Oh. Yeah, that might work out okay.
It might.
Speaking of the offensive line, though, obviously David Sanders was back in Nebraska, which is what you said all along. If he comes back for this weekend, you like Nebraska's chances.
Yep, I do. All bets are off.
And Michael Terry, another 5-star in town today. Isaiah Mosey, the son of Nebraska's latest, not latest, I guess, second latest coaching addition. He was on campus as well. A lot of people think he may be about to flip from Oregon. We'll see how that plays out.
I think I tried to do my homework when Lanning was in Indianapolis. I think they've got 4 receivers in this class already.
Yeah.
Oregon.
But
it's not like Nebraska's not deep either. So it's still going to be about it's still
going to be about the relationships.
Yeah.
That's the one that I expect that to happen. Like maybe I'm being too linear with, well, his dad got hired here. Nebraska was already in it. Like maybe I'm being too linear, but
it's like
I feel pretty good about that.
It's like Coach Rule said, at least worst case scenario, and which was really the way that he's thinking. We need presence in that area.
Yeah.
At the high school ranks.
Yeah, I think that Coach Mosey was hired.
Anything else is a bonus.
Yeah, I think Coach Mosey was hired on his own merits. Yeah. And then, if you happen to get a 4-star wide receiver out of it, like dope, bonus. But
dope.
I don't think it's
the dope. Ravi, Lulla here for the dopeness.
I don't think it was one of those like, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Let's get your kid to come to Nebraska. Coming up next, we got Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Lots to talk about with Sam here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McKewon.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Sam McKewon.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. That kind of thing.
Sam McKewon.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McKewon.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We're joined now by Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. What's up, Sam?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Sam, how are you, bud? Hanging in there?
I'm good. Yeah, absolutely. Little
little bit rich for camp. I think we've done the preamble, and now it's time to get to the camp and then to the season. So I'm definitely ready to roll.
I almost thought you were going to say the rest of the Constitution. You hit me with preamble. I was like, let's go, man, in our Olympic moments. But yeah, it is interesting because, like, fresh off the heels of Big Ten Media Days, and Ravi, of course, like, made me think, and I had a aha moment. But outside of Nebraska, okay, was there a team where you felt like their players or whose players reminded you the most of either their coach or their program when you went back and kind of assessed the fingerprints and DNA of these schools?
I wasn't there for day one, so I can't speak to those 6 teams. I think Matt Rule and his players are somewhat aligned, in that way. Now, the reason I say just somewhat, Rule's personality is a little different than at least 2 of those guys, and honestly, maybe Ty Robinson as well. And so, I think they're very much, they like him and they see his vision. And so when you listen to him, there's a kind of an alignment. I think Kirk Ferentz and his players' personalities are somewhat similar to their coach. They're kind of quiet, confident, I think is a word I would use. I was impressed with Mike Loxley of Maryland.
Easy to see why he recruits at a high level,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he always has one of the better opening speeches because it's a little bit of football, but it's a little bit of, humor, a little bit of old man humor. Like, he'll throw a joke in there about losing weight or waiting in line for something. And so I just, when I hear him, I think of like an older brother, or because he's not my dad's age, but I just think of a guy that's kind of wise that you'd want to spend time around. So I always like listening to him. I get kind of a kick out of his statements.
I really like Coach Moore.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I didn't get around it a ton to him, but he certainly had a lot of people around him, and he has an enormously difficult job. And that beat pool is tough. I mean, they ask a lot of good questions and hard questions.
Yeah.
And because I don't know if Moore talked that much. Like, he may continue the Harbaugh tradition of really not saying much over the summer, although I think he did one interview in there. But, like, they don't get the coach a lot until the season. And so when they go to Big Ten Media Days, and this was always true of Harbaugh, I mean, they got a bunch of questions ready to go, and they're not always roster questions. They're more the big picture, what have you done for me lately? And Moore has done a lot, actually, for them. I mean, he won them a national championship last year. He beat Ohio State. Harbaugh wasn't on the field. And so he's done a lot, but now he's got to do it again. He's got to do it without a lot of really good players. And so he may have one of the tougher jobs of the bunch. Yeah. So I think, those are some of the guys that jumped out. And Lincoln Riley had a good press conference. He did. I mean, he got asked a lot of hard questions. And I thought he handled them with a little bit of terseness, but also a little bit of just determination. And if you were to listen to his press conference, you would have thought he was on the hot seat.
Yeah,
the way he was asked questions.
Right.
And I wrote today, I think that's a sign of respect. I think it's a sign of respect for USC, that the expectation for USC football is still high enough that Lincoln Riley's getting the kind of questions that Bo Pelini got when Bo Pelini was just starting out at Nebraska, and Bo didn't like those questions because he didn't really understand why he was getting pigeonholed like that. But the reality is, where Nebraska was in 2009, 2010, 2011 is where USC is now. And I think there's a sense of this is still a power program, and the coach who's in charge of that program needs to be asked when they're going to get back there. And that's what Bo had to deal with, and he didn't like dealing with it. But I'll say Matt Rule doesn't really deal with that right now. Like, nobody's asking him about, why they didn't win more games last year. Everybody understands why. What you want to do is get your program to the point where people are asking the kind of questions that are actually harder to answer because the expectations are higher for your program than 6-6.
Sam, I'm it's an interesting thing you brought up with Coach Rule there because, a lot of the things that went wrong last year were obvious, but doesn't he also kind of tell us before we even ask what went wrong? Like, isn't that part of it too?
It's easy to do now. Yeah, he does. Again, those things will sort of.
Oh, shoot.
Like the turnover thing is, yeah, but there's a reason why you turn the ball over so much. It's not just that they happened. It's that, you couldn't throw the ball very effectively. You didn't have much of a quick passing game, and when you started running the football with the quarterback, he got jacked up, and he got hit and hit and hit until he finally fumbled. And then there's probably something to be, and you don't want to knock the kid, so you don't want to knock Jeff Sims. You want to try to not do that because he obviously felt horrible. But there is something to be said of how did you miss that evaluation so completely? Because that was not the player that we saw on the field at Minnesota was not even the player that played at Georgia Tech. So I'm not sure what exactly happened, but that player did not. One thing that Rule has admitted, and I appreciate it, is that the first two road games of the year took them by surprise in terms of crowd noise and intensity. And I think he has said more than once that he would have prepared a little differently for those first two games. And I appreciate that very much because I did feel like at Colorado, first, that's a crowd that none of us had ever seen. And I've been to Colorado many times. And second, Nebraska seemed a little nervous at Colorado. And so I can appreciate his comments on that very much.
Yeah. Although if I was going to pick, I would say, the year we went there and scored on the opening play, that place was a madhouse in Boulder. But anyway, I think one of the things that's always going to give him a chance, because this isn't like, and just a stereotype, because we're all men here, so hopefully none of us will be offended. We have this hard time of admitting things out loud on the fly, right? Like there's this thing that we do because of culturally how we've been designed, right? Provide, take care, like all these stereotypes. But when there's this level of honesty and outward admittal of I didn't do this right, it's a little jarring. And
disarming too.
And so that's the positive of it. It can be disarming. So when we hear him say things like that, we tend to move right along because we don't know how to consume it. But he's saying also, I'm willing to do some things as a coach in places I have to get better. I'm not just asking it of our players. I've got to be better myself. And sometimes I don't think we know how to process those things when he says them out loud.
Yeah, I think we can tend to be accustomed to coaches that don't divulge that and reveal it. I think that was, Bo was reluctant there for sure, and Scott was just generally reluctant to say a lot. So I think that's fair to say that it's unique when he does that. I think there's probably an expectation of almost an adversarial perspective.
I mean, he just said, Sam, he's like, hey, you know what? I studied Coach Ferentz all year. I'm taking a look now in the offseason, wind, the quarters. And we didn't make a very big deal of that. I'm like, how many other coaches say that out loud in areas that they want to grow in and use a counterpart as an example? Like, I think there's power in that.
Right. I think there is too. Certainly, and I wrote a story about his lesson in that moment and how it shaped the last minute of that game where Nebraska really, if they wanted to try to win it in regulation, had to throw the football into the teeth of that wind. And Iowa didn't have to. They could run the ball, and they did. And so, it certainly shaped the end of that football game in a number of ways. But yeah, I mean, I think he does a good job of being able to be transparent about the areas where they can grow. We'll see how that translates to camp and the early part of the season. Well, one thing that I've been reflecting on as I look at the schedule is they're basically going to play one type of offense for the first 3 weeks of the season, the non-conference portion of the season, and then they're going to play another kind of offense. And the Big Ten offenses are all pretty different. And so, like, the challenge that defense has to kind of prepare themselves mentally for one system and then switch it will be interesting to watch, because they're probably not going to face a lot of two tight end, power football the way that they will against Illinois. They will. They won't probably face that against UNI, Colorado, and UTEP. And so the defense, I think the defense is going to, frankly, have a hell of a lot of fun the first 3 weeks, and then they're going to have to, buckle the chin strap and play some of these other teams.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do think I could safely say the strength of UNI is their receiving core. Now we'll see who takes snaps for them. Colorado, definitely receiving core and quarterback. And that's interesting. That's something I would do at the high school level, right? And this is kind of neither here nor there, but right, playing North Columbus and our third opponent, like, we know we did install in the offseason a certain way, knowing we won't play a passing team for a while. So that's a good pull, Sam, because there's definitely something to that strategically, what I'll need now versus what I'll ultimately need to give us a run at this thing. Now, it has some core overlapping, right? Tend to the ball, tackling, playing spade. Like, it has some of those things, but you're right. It's vastly different looks. Do you remember last year he said this and kind of moved on? He said, one thing I wish I kind of would have done differently, and he was talking about those first couple of games, is it was kind of you do your thing on defense, we'll do our thing on offense. We won't intentionally script going against different looks specifically, right? Like, hey, give us an underfront, give us an overfront, give us, what you guys do your thing and we'll adjust. And he said, I almost would like to have gone back and done that differently. Like, that's another one of those things that he said out loud that I'm like, okay, like he's letting me know he's constantly evaluating where he is. Those are the kinds of people that at least give themselves a chance at success, because he's not paralyzed by it like some when we have to address our faults. He's motivated by it, so he doesn't feel like that again.
I think that's accurate for sure. And he's also mentioned, the need for a 4-man pass rush. And the way that I envision that is that, you bring your fourth guy down and he may be on the line of scrimmage or very close to the line of scrimmage, whether his hand's in the dirt or not. And you're more often a 4-man pass rush team. And you're doing a little bit less of this down we're going to bring 3 and this down we're going to bring 6. And especially against a guy like Hurrdat Sanders, who, they sacked him 9 times or something last year, but Hurrdat got his 2. Like, he was able, especially when they rush 3, you give that guy 9 seconds, he's hard. He will get you. He will find a way to pick you apart. He's a good player, regardless of what he says about Nebraska or what he said about other people.
Yeah, he's really good.
He's very good. And so I think part of what he was saying, or what I'm envisioning, is Nebraska just needs to get better at being a plain old-fashioned 4-man pass rush. You drop 7 guys. You run whatever pass defense behind it that you run. They have many that they can, but that you're just trying to get home with the 4, and you're defending 5 with 7, and and it's just a standard thing. Maybe you got a guy that's watching Sanders. Sanders doesn't really want to run. He wants to stay back there. So, that's all in preparation for what I think is going to be a really challenging game against Colorado. And UTEP is actually good preparation. Like, UTEP's going to do some of the same concepts. They won't be as good of a team, but it'll be similar. I think. And then you get into the season and you're running into teams that are going to do. Frankly, they're going to do a lot different things. Indiana, we don't know for sure yet what Curt Cignetti's going to do, but they're probably going to run the ball quite a bit, and they're probably going to run some read option and move away from the spread pass thing. So Nebraska's going to get a heavy dose of physical smash mouth football. UCLA's going to do the same thing. UCLA's not. Eric Bieniemy has all the plays in the book. Let's be clear, but he's going to run the ball. It's what he was doing in Washington. It's what he wants to do. So it's going to be a season full of physical football for Nebraska after the first 3 games.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, in your Monday Rewind, you're kind of talking about the expectation level difference, and we brought this up with Lincoln Riley and USC and kind of where Nebraska's at and how currently the bar's lower at Nebraska, which is I think totally fair. My question though is, like, how long is Nebraska's fan base going to be easy to please? Because we've seen it the other way, obviously. You mentioned Bo Pelini, and now we're seeing it maybe for the first time, maybe the lowest it's been in recent memory. Like, how long is that bar easy to clear for Nebraska if they do start to make progress?
I think that, you know, the bar will gradually go up as they make progress, for sure. At this point, what we're talking about in terms of the Husker fan base is, I think there's a very entrenched, loyal group above a certain age. Then in another age group, it could go either way. And then in the youngest age group, I think it's more, hey, I want to be a fan. I'm interested in it. I kind of like this Rule guy. I kind of like Dylan Rayola. I like him. But, you know, I'll check in if you guys get good. And so that group of fans, you almost are trying to win over. There's kids out there, and my son being one of them, that are just sort of like, yeah, they're good. And then they go to school, and, you know, in my kid's school, it's probably more soccer than football. And, well, you know, European football over American football. And, you know, the conversations that my son has are not really related to football at all. Like, they're related to, is it Messi or is it Ronaldo or is it Mbappe or, you know, whatever. And so, like, that's probably the thing that's changed, is that kids aren't even plugging into football that way, college football or even pro football. They're into soccer and the NBA. Those are the two sports that my son talks about the most. And so Nebraska's got to get good to win that kind of generation of kids. Like, those kids are, you know, plugged more into other sports. I mean, my son's into the Olympics and LeBron and all that. So that's the area where Nebraska fan base can grow. I think they're going to retain the fans who are older, because those fans have a sense of responsibility and stewardship for what the program has been, to continue having it be what it is. And so I think that those fans are going to be hard to ever lose. It's a question of growing the fan base going forward, and that's the area where Rule knows all that. That's why he's doing what he's doing with the girls' camp, although that's not the only reason he's doing what he's doing with the girls' camp. Why he's running the youth camps in Omaha, why he's so intent on creating these camps, because he's trying to create a culture of football in the state that's larger than just, can you come play for me? It's, will you be a lifelong supporter of this program because of the time that you spent in these camp experiences and you had really good? He understands all of that. Nebraska really hasn't had a head coach who really understood that whole system since maybe Tom Osborne.
God, that's
so like, he really gets all that. So I'm not telling him, I wouldn't be saying that to him and him not understanding that. He understood that irrespective of anybody talking to him about it. It's pretty impressive.
It's incredible. And I'm not, I get it. Oh, look weird, DV saying something good about Coach Rule. But I'm giving you the concrete context points on what I gravitate towards. And listening to you talk about that, he's all in on Nebraska being a brand before Nebraska is even good. He's unapologetic about what Nebraska in the end represents, not only to him, but what he wants it to represent to the country. That he doesn't do all these national things because he loves hamming it up. He does these things because he wants you to be on the front end of the brand, because you trust that it's Nebraska. They'll handle the getting good part, but to have the conversations in the meantime is such a catalyst for him. It's incredible. Like, it's why he recruits, right? He wants you to buy into them before they get to the bowl games, before they get to 8, 9, 10 wins. Hey, trust us. Hey, trust in us that we'll get you there. Don't wait until we get there. Now, if you want to wait, I understand, but you're gonna miss the boat. That's the same way.
Yeah.
That's the same way that he brands the program nationally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of connective tissue there, and he does a nice job of that. That's all. You know, I can't say enough for how all of the systems have been set up, and and the framework is there to have really good conversations about the program and football and all the rest. I think the question now becomes just the football itself. And one of the things that struck me from media days is that there's just a lot of really good coaches in the league. No one's really taking a step back.
It's a goal.
You know, like if you got Maryland, Mike Locksley called plays for Alabama. He's been around. You know, you go to Illinois. Yeah, Brett Bielema is he can be kind of a meathead at times, but man, that guy knows how to win games, and he's done it at 3 different spots. And so like he knows how to win football games, and he knows how to play defense. And you know, Kirk Signetti did a whole bunch at the Group of 5 level and at the FCS level. He's no joke. He's kind of like a Lance Leipold, you know, a little bit. Luke Fickell went to a college football playoff. People forget that about him. I was impressed with Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. He made Oregon State a winner, and that's not easy to do. So like, there's a lot of really, really good coaches in the league, and there's good players too. And so every time Nebraska steps on the field this season, with the exception of UTEP and UNI, it's probably within a touchdown. It's probably within a touchdown, which means you have to coach and play at an elite level to win 7 or 8 games. Even with this schedule, people look at the schedule and go, it's manageable. It's manageable, but all these teams have caught up to Nebraska. Illinois and Rutgers are pretty much just as good as Nebraska on the field. You have to outplay them and outcoach them so that you can win the games by 7 or 10 points. It's a pretty interesting setup that we have right now.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, good stuff as always. We appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam.
You know, he's rattling off coaches there. We didn't even get to Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah.
Didn't even get to Lincoln Riley, who's got college football playoff appearances and multiple Heisman winners.
Yep.
Who else didn't we get to? Didn't get to Sharon Moore.
It's a big boy league.
Didn't get to PJ Fleck, who's won pretty consistently at this league, although we've got some concerns about Minnesota this year. Like, there's 4 more coaches right there we didn't even get to. Right? Like, it's not for the weak-hearted.
So and I'll take it one step further, because I did a deep dive into this 2 years ago. Go look at the assistant coaches and coordinators.
Oh yeah,
you have to be on your game is incredible. And if you have holes, these guys will find it.
I'll say they will be exposed.
They will find it. It is a very high coach acumen rich league.
All right, coming up next, I'm going to throw some rapid fire recruit names at you.
Oh, man.
Just get gut checks on you. Just see how you feel about them.
Okay.
We'll do that next, coming up here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, and I'm reminding you to get to hurrdatsports.com to get the Hale Varsity Football Yearbook for 2024. You can secure that order anytime between now and August 11th at hurrdatsports.com. You'll get exclusive interviews, position breakdowns, one-of-a-kind photos, and so much more to get you ready for the 2024 season. Again, go to hurrdatsports.com to order your copy today through August 11th. Wanted to throw some names at you.
Okay.
I just want to see how you feel.
No.
Gut check.
I'm not doing it.
Gut check.
I don't want to play your reindeer games.
I don't know that any of these guys could be described as reindeer.
Okay.
But we'll give it a go anyway. It's not Christmas time. It's not reindeer games yet.
It's Christmas time in the city.
We're a few months away still.
Well, could be happening here in the next couple of weeks.
Christmas?
Yes.
Early Christmas for Nebraska?
Correct.
How do we feel about Nebraska's chances with one David Sanders Jr.?
What's my scale?
Let's
I
say,
feel? I'll tell you this. I feel better post visit than pre.
And you felt pretty good that he was coming at all, right? Pre-visit.
You mean like when he came back?
Yes.
Yeah.
let's go scale of 1 to 10. 10 is he's already committed to Nebraska. He just hasn't announced it yet. 1 is he told them on the visit that he is not coming here. David Sanders Jr.
I'm totally speculating.
Yeah, that's what this is. Gut. This is just a gut check.
6.
Okay. You think most Nebraska fans would take their chances at a 6 on David Sanders Jr.?
They should.
Okay.
I mean, I would.
Yeah, I would too. It was pretty good.
6 is good.
A question real quick on David Sanders Jr. because I think Heath asked this in the chat earlier.
Heath,
like Heath Bar.
Yeah, I know. Did you tell Heath that he came up on our roadie?
Oh yeah, I told him about.
No, you told me. You didn't tell Heath.
Yeah, he told me about. And it wasn't on the roadie. It was I texted you when you guys were driving back. I think.
You're like my guy Heath.
Yeah, he had broke some bread with David Sanders Jr. and Mosey over the weekend.
Yeah, at a place that I had frequented.
Yeah, so that. But he brought up in the chat. He says, serious question. Like, how do you pitch development to the number 1 player or player at his position in the country?
Look at his frame and the level of competition.
Right.
He's played against good players, not elite.
Yeah.
And he looks like a power forward.
Mm-hmm. He's real lean for a tackle still.
Yeah, he's like he knows.
Yeah.
And the easy way to pitch it is kind of I gave you a snapshot on whatever day it was, Friday. I was talking to Vers, and I said, there's a reason his parents and grandma and grandpa, when they came the first time around, asked the most questions as a whole during the strength and conditioning and nutrition portion. I mean, he raised his hand.
Because they know.
Like 3 times.
Yeah.
3 times.
Well,
which was 3 times more than anybody else in there.
Let me just put it
this way. It's a small, quaint.
Yeah, it's like an intimate group.
It was very intimate.
Yeah. So I'll just put this out there for context, and then we can move on to the next guy. There is not a single offensive tackle in the country that is ready to go to the NFL as an 18-year-old.
100%.
That's it. That's the whole thing, right? There's not very many offensive tackles in the country, no matter what you're rated, that are ready to play at the Power 2 level as true freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that a ton, right? So that's it. That's the pitch for development. Is like, hey, you have all the skills you need to go be number 1 pick in the draft. You wouldn't be that tomorrow, so you got some work to do.
Yeah.
And where you go to school is going to depend on if you get there or not.
So I always say this: the example I would give is if you're trying to pick a high school and your son or daughter is already smart, they're going to be smart wherever they go. Your job in terms of guidance is to help minimize the weaknesses and accentuate the strengths.
Absolutely.
That's how you look at recruiting, right? It's like, oh, you could get this education. He's going to be smart anyway.
And I would make the argument that's true of any position, not just offensive line. Now, it's more true on offensive line, right? Because of physical development. Like there's Adrian Peterson looked like he maybe could have hacked it in the NFL coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Right. But there's not very many of those.
That's how you rush for almost 2 bills as a
1,800 yards or whatever
as a freshman.
As a part-time starting as a freshman, right?
Yeah. Was it game 4? Game 5?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't the whole year. Yeah. Because was it DeMarco Murray?
Yeah, they had a nice little 10
before. But that's kind of my point: is whether you're Michael Terry, for instance, or David Sanders, no 18-year-old's ready to go to the NFL. Speaking of Michael Terry, scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? He seems harder to read. I think.
Yeah, without question, because I don't know near as much about him.
Right, but even just from the outset, it seems like he enjoys the recruiting process a little bit more.
I would say a 4.
Yeah.
It's only because
less than 50-50, but still a shot.
Yeah, and it's only because it's 1 of 3.
Yeah,
and not 1 of 2. And the other thing is
Nebraska, Oregon, A&M.
And the other thing is I have to pit his personality against what I think is the prevailing personality traits of the program.
Yeah, that's part of the reason this one's harder to read.
Yeah,
is there's some guys that outwardly don't necessarily seem like they'd be fits, but maybe internally they're.
And I don't know enough.
Yeah. So that one I agree is hard. But again, the fact that Nebraska's in on this one, incredible.
Yeah.
Last one for guys in this class.
It's kind of like Easter resurrection for those of you that believe. Like,
yeah,
they came back.
Yeah, they sure did. Last one for this class, Isaiah Mosey.
Seven.
Okay. Any reason?
Well, I know you think slam dunk.
I wouldn't say 10, but I was going to say 8, I think.
I don't. Number one, I trust that Coach Rule hired Coach Mosey.
Yes.
For a multitude of reasons.
I agree.
And before people say, oh, of course you're going to give Coach Rule the benefit of the doubt, remember, he retained Donovan Rayola when it didn't look like the popular thing to do, and he didn't get Dylan.
Yeah.
And he extended him
after not getting Dylan.
Yeah.
With no
so that lets me know like
he was going to end up getting Dylan.
And plus there everything about Coach Rule's personality about not being so attached.
Emotional.
Put your big boy pants on. Don't be emotional. This is college football. Things happen. Just continually think, how can I get better? Like, I don't think he's going to stay in his feels to compromise just one get, because he thinks there's nothing about his personality that says he thinks that narrow.
I think that Coach Rule, and I don't want to speak for him, but I would guess that Coach Rule doesn't believe that any single player is more valuable than what he's building in terms of the program as a whole.
Yes, especially at a position. It's not like it's not a position of need.
Yeah.
But they're in good shape.
Yeah, they're fine right now.
They're in good shape.
And they've got some guys coming in already. Like, it's not urgent that they get Isaiah Mosey.
But you will always take good players. So.
100%. But so Daniel asked an interesting question here in the last 90 seconds of the segment. Kind of in that Mosey discussion, he says, if you don't cheat or whatever, is he the only one that cares about like hiring or keeping a coach that helps you get a player? That doesn't move the needle for him. Like, does it matter whether or not Coach Rule hired Mosey just to get his kid? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about not compromising what the program's about.
Yeah,
right?
I don't really care either way.
Yeah.
I mean, if Coach Rule said, hey, you know what, I want you to come down and work for me. I like this, and this. I think you could help us here. And my kid happened to be there. That doesn't move my needle one way or another. Now, if it happened before my kid got there.
So that's, I think, the question.
So if it happened before my kid got there, it depends on who the adult is, not the perception.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact what Coach Rule would say if you thought about that ahead of time. Why do you put those kind of mental constraints on yourself? Why do you give a rip about what other people think?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that lets you know that's how he thinks.
Yes. And I think that's fair. And again, if he looks at it as like, hey, this is a guy that I think can do the job and fits the culture, and if he flips his son at the same time, great.
Yeah.
Like, take the bonus. Like, take the wins where you get them.
Like I said, his ability to walk away and have a plan is captivating.
Coming up next, we've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, and we're brought to you by our friends at Team Jack Foundation. Make sure you get to teamjackfoundation.org to get involved and to help them find better treatments for childhood brain cancer and one day a cure. You can volunteer. You can donate right there on the page. You can see what events are coming up, and you can see what projects they're involved with as well. All of that and more at teamjackfoundation.org. DB.
Ravi.
What's up?
Chilling.
Chilling?
Oh, yeah.
How are we doing?
We're good. We're good.
Trying to figure out what to eat tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to do Caleb wants some version of quesadillas because he's got to leave, obviously. Yeah. And pack because they moved to the dorms.
What is that, tomorrow?
Yeah.
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 So was he home all weekend?
Yeah, he got there Saturday.
Okay.
And
that's nice. You get to spend a few days with him.
Yeah, it's been real chill. Like yesterday, I actually watched him. Well, we had an amazing talk on Saturday for breakfast. It was just us, and so that was a good 2 hours about the future and stuff. And then last night after dinner, he was kind of doing this, and it's weird, but not really because it's his personality. He's playing this dynasty, and he's like cutting guys and hitting the portal and recruiting guys and managing rosters, and so it's the longest I've ever been around a video game without touching a controller because I haven't played in 20 years.
Yeah.
But that game is really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. And so we just talked about, like the roster and what would he tell his, what would just turn 19-year-old tell 17-year-old and like what he's looking forward to. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And then that's about it.
It's kind of weird. I wasn't necessarily even going to bring this up in the segment, but
they were playing paint. Like they had a deal to do before Sanders got there.
Oh yeah.
So it was an interesting weekend.
Well, and speaking of Sanders and kind of like what does a incoming freshman tell a guy that's going to be a high school senior, it seems like Dylan's doing a lot of recruiting.
Yeah, they have a good relationship.
Like it seems like he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Yeah, they have a really, really good relationship, and I think for Sanders, it's gravy. It's not the core of the recipe. Like that's the beautiful
the relationship with Rayola.
Yeah, he's like, oh, and I get this too.
Yeah, so it's not like he wants to come play with Don Rayola. It's he maybe wants to come play for Nebraska, and the fact that Dylan's there is super cool.
Yeah, like wow, this is what this place is really about.
Yeah,
because I think that's I tell people this all the time. Like that's the key. It has to be something bigger
than any individual,
than the than the relationship.
Because it's like it's usually a coach, right?
Yeah, and because it's not enough. I'm just telling you, it's not enough to sustain you.
Yeah,
in times of tough times. It is not
like when rubber hits the road.
A singular relationship is not enough to sustain you.
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that.
I mean, I don't think it works like that in anything, but certainly not in recruiting.
We
right?
think it. We kind of talk as though it does,
because
right?
it's enough to get you in the door.
Yeah,
it's enough to get you. Like a singular relationship is enough to get you to sign up for something.
Yeah,
but when it gets real, that's where you're like, okay, what am I really doing here?
Yeah, you need to have some versatility and kind of a holistic approach, like to recruiting, because what happens is it's like the whole Nebraska thing, and then Scott tried it with Florida. There has to be some other level of connection if it's not how blank initially seemed.
Yeah, if right off the bat it's not perfect.
You know what I mean?
Right? Because at some point it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's there has to be something with McGahee and Shavers and Tarver other than just their own connection. Because remember, they're developing at different stages.
Yeah.
So, and I just use them as an example because of
they're all kind of grouped together in the same area.
The same area, right?
Yeah.
So Tarver's got to be able to look at Shavers, and Shavers is like the two deep, and Tarver's trying to go get a job. We forget about him, but he's trying to go get a job, right? And so the development is at different stages. So the units that you're working with is at different stages. So the level of connectivity has to be something different, because remember, they're only 18, 19 years old. So it can't be the direct compare and contrast.
And if you're in different position groups, you're not going to spend that. I mean, you're going to spend time together, but you're not spending every waking minute together.
And oh, by the way, like if I'm Tarver, my guy isn't there.
Yeah. The guy who theoretically you would have had the relationship with.
So it has to be about something else.
Yeah.
And that's why I can appreciate, and I've said this from the jump when he got there, because you could tell how he was trying to build this thing from a familiar standpoint. Right? Like diet. And, look at how they diversified their staff. Look at the admin team. You know what Damon doesn't get enough credit for? Hiring young up-and-comers, and he's diversified the portfolio tremendously. Because as you walked around Big Ten Media Days, how much of that did you see?
Not a lot.
Yeah. See, Nebraska is intentionally looking for qualified people that other people can relate to.
Because that matters, especially when you're young.
Well, who are you telling?
Especially when you're young. right? The younger you are, the more it matters.
Yeah, that athletic department is,
especially if you don't.
Listen, I'm not sitting here telling you I know how everybody's going to function.
Yeah.
But when I look at how it's being built internally, and the roles and the camaraderie, it's intentional, man.
For sure.
Especially there's definitely a plan on how connected, what's our level of connectivity, and how unified of a front can we be to brace for some turbulent times.
Yeah.
This ain't all willy-nilly. It's not like, let me go down a limb here. Like, it's pretty specific.
Well, especially consider these guys where a lot of them, until they start taking their official visits, haven't been more than however long their longest road trip is outside of their hometown, right? In terms of leaving their state or whatever. So it's not just, I'm more comfortable with X, Y, and Z. It's, I've never had experience with somebody that is outside of X, Y, and Z, whether it's a cultural group or a socioeconomic group or a part of the country or whatever, right? Like, there are a lot of these guys are coming from places of really limited life experiences, and part of it's age, part of it's economics, that's just the reality of the situation a lot of times. And so you're already asking them to go from a place they know to a place they had probably never heard of, at least hadn't any idea what it was about until you get them on campus.
And certainly had never been there.
Yes, definitely had never been there if they'd even heard of it. And so you're already taking this person and dropping him into a very unfamiliar situation. Giving them some familiarity can go a really long way. And that's something that I don't know how much people think about if they haven't been in that situation. You gravitate towards familiarity, right? Even if it's just long enough so that you can get your feet under you, right? That's what can make the difference between like bailing on a situation or not being able to flourish or whatever, and being able to keep your head above water long enough to learn how to swim.
Yep.
And that's something that if you can provide that for kids, that's where, we talk about the culture, and this is all part of it, right? If you can provide an infrastructure for a kid where he doesn't feel like he's drowning the minute he gets on campus, that kid's a lot more likely to stay, isn't he?
Yeah.
Your retention rates are going to go, because they talk about first impressions being important, right? That's not just with people, that's with situations too. If I get a bad first impression of a situation, it's going to be really hard for me to want to stay in that situation. No matter, even if it improves, right? That's why we see it sometimes like, this guy played and he did this and whatever. It's like, what was his first impression of being here? What was it like for him before the season started? Because that's 2-3 months before things really get into it. And you're like, man, if your first 2-3 months in a situation are crappy, how much you going to want to stay there? Because that taste stays in your mouth, right?
Yeah, it's just funny. Like, I know a couple of guys that just got new contracts that Coach Rule used to coach. And one player in particular called, this was in the offseason, and he sent him a message. And he basically, in a nutshell, was saying, hey, man, they're joking. They obviously have a really good relationship. He just got his second contract. And he said, man, whether it's, in the hood in Philadelphia or in the mean streets of Lincoln, Nebraska, or, Waco, he said, nobody can ever accuse you of playing favorites and not knowing your surroundings. And he's like, man, ain't no way, Coach Rule, you could be racist. You got more brothers paid than anybody I know. Listen, that's what he said. He said, you've got more brothers paid than anybody I know. Your track record is good with me. That's just his way of saying thank you. You know what I mean? So even with guys at that level, they still know that process sometimes permeates, because when it doesn't work out, oh man, this guy doesn't like me, or this, that, and oh man, it's not what it is. I'm in this for you guys too.
Oh, that's good stuff. Coming up next, we've got Mike Farrell of MikeFarrellSports.com, the godfather of recruiting, to kick off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We are joined now by Mike Farrell of MikeFarrellSports.com. He's the godfather of recruiting. Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, Mike. I'm pretty excited to grab it. We told our producer, I'm like, gosh, there's so many national stories on the recruiting level. I'm like, let's shoot for, and it just so happens, I said, Shane, that's a great get, because Mike, you just finished a couple of pieces, the Penn State James Franklin thing we just talked about last week. I want to get to that. But a couple of weeks ago, it was the culture war, right? Colorado, Nebraska, strong opinions. I'm like, bam, let's do this on a Monday morning, man. How you been?
I've been good. I don't do radio anymore, so but
Yeah.
I just don't. I do full ride radio once a week on Sirius XM with Childers and Newheisel. And then everybody else asks me, and I just don't even respond or don't do it anymore. It's been, 27 years doing this. It just gets tiring. But I've got a fascination with the Nebraska fan base, as you can see by the website, the articles. I've always been fascinated by the fan base. To the point where I've told them over the years, pump the brakes on this. It's not going to work. like the Calabrasca movement, which was, ridiculous and was never going to work. And they hated me and they wanted me dead. But I was right, to the fact that pump the brakes on Scott Frost, he might be over his head. But I believe in Matt Rule, so it's kind of interesting. That's why I'm writing more Nebraska stuff, because I followed this guy very extensively throughout my career. And I know he's a very good coach, and I think he's going to do some good things there. So that's why you're going to see more Nebraska content on MikeFarrellSports.com.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I obviously follow you on social media, so I get a chance to kind of watch this unfold real time. And what is it about Coach Rule that you like? I know for the fan base, it starts with his level of authenticity, right? He's very disarming, and he's a tremendous speaker, but that doesn't always win you games. A lot of times it doesn't win you games. So what is it for you loosely that you gravitate towards?
Well, he's a good guy. He's an everyman. The egotistical, narcissistic head football coach that I deal with 95% of the time. That's not him. It's not like we're buddies or hang out, but and I don't know him that well. I mean, I've talked to him here and there, but I know people who have worked under him for many, many years, dating back to Temple, and then obviously the job he did at Baylor. He's a tremendous talent evaluator. He's a straight shooter. He's a developer of players. And all these things are extremely important in Nebraska, because you're not going to get 4- and 5-star kids to come to Lincoln. You're going to have to coach them up. You're going to have to turn the 3 into a 4 or the 3 into a 5. You'll get your 4 and 5 here and there. Those guys got to be hits. He can recruit anywhere, and he, coaches kids up. He's an inspirational type of guy. That's why, he took the bag in the NFL, and nobody blames him for that. And that, let's just be honest. I mean, if you're offered whatever, $80 million guaranteed money, yeah, you're going to take it. But that's not his fit. It's not where he belongs, because you're not able to pick and choose as much as you want through free agency as you are through recruiting. You're not able to pick your own team through the draft. It's a slower build, and it's hard to find, those diamonds in the rough. Recruiting, there's so many kids, you can go out and find them. So that's kind of why I think, his second year at most places, well, at Temple and Baylor, of course, have been vast improvements, and he's walked into some dumpster fires. And I think, you'll see a vast improvement here, but I'm pumping the brakes. I see a lot of Nebraska fans saying, oh my gosh, this is the year, 10-2. Listen, you haven't gone to a bowl in a very long time. Last year finished with a dud. You had a losing record. Let's be happy with 7-5. Let's be happy moving forward. I see this first 7 games of the schedule. I see every Nebraska fan saying we're going 7-0. That's not going to happen. That's not life. That's not what you're going to get tripped up. 8-4, 7-5 would be amazing for this fan base, and I think that's what we can look at, as a goal for Matt Rule in year 2.
How much of what you were talking about, Mike? Obviously he's recruited my son, and I said early on, one of the reasons why I felt comfortable with him is if something ever happened to me, I like how he's invested in young people holistically, right? And you talked about his talent evaluation. How much of that has to do with the fact that he has this unique ability, it seems, to care about the whole person, which in turn leaves guys really trusting in what he says from a development standpoint? How much of those things do you think go hand in hand?
I think it's coupled with, honesty. There's a lot of coaches out there that will make you feel important, that will invest their time into, okay, so this is his cousin that's like his brother. This is his uncle who's very involved in the process. This is going to come down to what mom wants versus what dad wants. All those things, you have to do your research in college football recruiting on the family dynamic and who's most important in the kid's life. But you also do that with a touch of honesty. I know of, situations from former staffers of his where they've actually been honest and said, listen, I know, your uncle thinks this, but I also know that this is going to come down to mom and dad. And, you really need to kind of push him to the side a little bit and not to alienate the uncle, but also have the discussion with the uncle and say, listen, you're extremely important in this process as well, but that's not your kid. Let's let them decide. And if they decide to come here, we're going to include the entire family. Like, there's an honesty that comes with that, whereas other coaches would be like, let's try to make everybody happy, and you can do that. And some coaches, Urban Meyer is the greatest recruiter I've ever, experienced in college football. Make everybody feel great about it and happy about it. But then when they get there, all of a sudden, it's just not, the foundation isn't there. And sometimes those kids get, disenchanted and they want to transfer. And in this day of the portal, it's extremely important that you keep kids, be honest with them up front and tell them what your vision is for them and have them buy into that. I just think honesty coupled with his engagement with recruits is important.
We're talking with Mike Farrell, MikeFarrellSports.com. Mike, I've been always a little bit curious about how people nationally view Nebraska in terms of their recruiting prowess. You mentioned earlier that, Nebraska is probably not going to consistently get high 4 and 5 star kids, but I do wonder, what is their ceiling in terms of consistently recruiting? If you go to the various services, they have mostly sat in the 15 to 25 range in terms of national rankings, outside of a couple of blips where I think Mike Riley had a year that was higher than that. And obviously Bill Callahan back in the day had a borderline top 5 class. Is 15 to 25 in your mind kind of a general ceiling for where Nebraska can consistently recruit at? Or if they start winning, do you think the ceiling's higher than that?
I don't know. 15 to 25 is great, honestly, because you pencil in, 6 out of the top 10 from the SEC immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way it is, based on recruiting geography, historical recruiting. Alabama, Georgia, LSU are always going to be up there. Now Texas, they're always up there. So, you eliminate a lot of spots in the top 10. So then that's everybody sort of, battling amongst 7 or 8 teams to finish 15th and 16th and 17th. If you can get there, I think you're in good shape. And you're not going to out-recruit Ohio State. Most years you're not going to out-recruit Penn State and Michigan. But finishing, 4th, 5th in Oregon, you're not going to out-recruit them now either. Finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th in the Big Ten is the recipe to have success in that conference. But to me, it's like, again, if you have a guy who can recruit well, the Marlon Lucky class that everybody remembers, but a guy that can't develop, or, the inflated Riley class with a few of those overrated guys from California that weren't going to be happy there from the beginning and were sort of Keyshawn Johnson guys, it's not going to matter. To me, I don't care about recruiting rankings when it comes to Nebraska. I look at them similar to West Virginia under Rich Rod. Are you getting the right guys? You're winning battles on the road all the time. I know this class has a lot of in-state kids, and I think that's important for Matt Rule to take care of the in-state kids. You got a couple Dakotas in here, and you got some Missouri, but they need to win battles in his stomping grounds in the Northeast. They have to win some battles in the Southeast and Texas and California and do a little bit more of that, but mix it all together like Rich Rod did at West Virginia. Have them fit your scheme, have them fit what you want out of them, and then become a very dangerous football program that recruits on the road, and then is able to get better players as you have success. Rich Rodriguez was able to get, a Noel Devine or a Steve Slayton, guys like that, that were high-level recruits, and he beat out some big-time programs for him after he started to have some success. So that's what I see for Nebraska. Listen, it's a long trip. People go there, fans go there. Not fans, recruits go there. They get enamored because they're greeted. They're, the atmosphere at the home games is amazing. The atmosphere at the spring game, even spring practice, is amazing. But then, you get home, and it takes a long time to get home. And then you go back for a visit. It takes a long time to get there, and then a long time to get back home. And then you realize it's really cold there in the winter. So many factors that work against you that I think what Rule does is a good job. He's not squeezing anybody to get a commitment in July or in June or May. Come back experience the atmosphere, get used to the travel, because there is some, and then if you like us, you're gonna be happy. But it's a different approach in Nebraska. You can't fly them in immediately and fly them out back, and it's always been a problem, since recruiting has become national, and I think that's the thing they have to overcome.
What was with Rock contributing and Westfall, that is, and you can still find it up on the site. One of the things I felt like was very interesting, because it's polarizing here, not just because of the hate from the past when I was playing in the 90s, but also Adrian Martinez, and a star was getting ready to be born, and then he got hurt against Colorado, and then the next year we go to Boulder, and Coach Frost had put all his eggs into that basket, and Nebraska traveled well to Colorado. Coach Rule last year saying they didn't really match the energy of being in Boulder. Plenty of ammunition for week 2 to be important. Walk me back through kind of the culture battle you guys set up with the article with Nebraska and Colorado and long-term sustainability. How does that relate to the importance of week 2 for you?
Yeah, I popped it back up at the top of the site, so it's there for anybody who missed it. Well, here's the thing. I mean, culture is extremely important in college football. When you look at Nick Saban and his dynasty, you look at what Kirby Smart's doing, and culture is different. Everybody's saying, obviously, there's all these arrests at Georgia, and Nick Saban had his issues, and, Urban Meyer had his issues at Florida. Culture is not like squeaky clean, amazing students and citizens. It's everybody buying in to make everybody else better. It's battling in practice. It's getting to know your teammate. It's Brock Bowers being in his 3rd year, taking a freshman tight end under his belt and saying, listen, this is how Kirby likes it. This is how the offensive coordinator likes it. This is how we do it here. Colorado will not have that, because they won't have guys that have had 3 years into the program. It's all transfer portal, or most of it's transfer portal. And there's not a lot of guys that can tell you how the culture is, because there is no culture. What Rule wants to do with his limited numbers in the portal and with his limited reliance on the portal is build that up, so that in 2 years he's got a Dylan Rayola who's passing the torch on to a younger quarterback, who's telling him, this is the way we do things here. This is what time you show up to meetings. It's how you present yourself in an offensive meeting. All of that stuff has to be taught by the players themselves. And when you get that rolling, you have a successful football team. It doesn't mean you're going to win a national championship, but it means you're going to be successful. You're going to be competitive every year, and there's not going to be a big fall off. At Colorado, the danger here, and it's not really a danger because it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I'm sorry. I'm an expert in a lot of things, and people tell me, well, it's never been done before. Yeah. Bill Schneider's the only one who could kind of like rely on mercenaries, which were JUCOs, and actually build a program that had success. And I don't know how he did it, because everybody who in that portal and everybody at junior college has a problem. It's either a problem of playing time, it's homesickness, it's academics, it's off field. Some reason they're leaving, and there's some reason kids were going to JUCO, and he was able to do that. It's very rare. Deion's not that guy that's going to be able to do that. Matt Rule's not going to rely on that. Mike Norvell did a successful job of it, but he was forced to do so because he came in during COVID. He had no ability to recruit on the road for like a year, and he was a new coach in a new place. So he had to rely on the portal. He got real lucky because he hit a home run on all those kids. Rule's not doing that. Now, does that mean Nebraska's going to beat Colorado in week 2? I don't know. They didn't win last year. If they don't turn the ball over a billion times, they're going to win the football game. But it's an important game simply because they're in 2 different conferences, but it sets a message. You know, Deion's a fraud if he loses, or Rule is over his head if he loses. It's a really important game, and probably the most important game of 2 losing programs in the country.
Talking with Mike Farrell of Mike Farrell Sports. Is it almost, you mentioned the junior colleges with Bill Snyder. It almost feels like Deion is running Colorado like a JUCO, where basically you're turning your roster over every year. We've got Iowa Western, one of the best JUCOs down the road here in Omaha, just across the river. And like their roster it's almost like a 90% turnover every year. Like it almost seems like that's how Deion's running Colorado.
Yeah, and that's okay if everybody else has to do that. So if you're playing other JUCOs and they've got a 90% turnover rate, then it's fair. But if you're doing that against, programs that aren't doing that and aren't relying upon that, you bring 5 new offensive linemen in and you give them, the spring and the fall, and sometimes some are there in the spring, some are arriving in the fall. They're not going to gel. It's going to be difficult. And that's why we saw 80,000 sacks last year, because they have to have a continuity. You bring a defensive line group in and they're all transfers and they don't know each other and they don't know their strengths. They don't know this stunt versus this stunt, or this guy likes outside leverage. You have to know your teammates and what strengths they play to, and you have to work in conjunction as a unit. If you keep doing that, you're going to start over every year. You can have great skill players, and they do. They've got some good skill players. But it's the trenches that you're going to suffer. And I think that's where you're going to see Colorado fall short.
Let me go national here with you. Stay there, Mike, with Penn State. We had and it's just coincidence, which is part of the reason we wanted you. We went through this exercise before we got to Indy last week about the perception of Penn State and who needed to have a good showing. And once we got back, I said, gosh, I felt like his players most reflected his personality. That's a confident bunch. Last week we went back and we looked at his recruiting versus the results, and you could easily make the case, Mike, if you go back to 2016, he's outperformed his recruiting clearly. There's some composites that have him in the high teens, low 20s, with only one top 6 class since he got to Penn State. You think the perception of him is just that he can't beat Ohio State and Michigan? Or like kind of you're alluding to, hey, be careful here. He wins a lot more games than he probably should. And I know I'm saying that out loud to you Penn State Blue Blood fans.
Well, so it's careful what you wish for. And Nebraska fans kind of know this pretty well. They got rid of a guy who won 9 games every year. Now he was a bit of an ass. I don't know if I could say that on radio.
That's okay.
But, he was a bit of a problem. He wasn't a great representative of the university, but the guy won. James Franklin is not that problem. James Franklin is a very professional individual, very articulate, very well spoken, does not lose his stuff. He's got criticism that maybe he, doesn't take enough of the blame upon himself. But I know James Franklin. I've known him for 25 years, probably 30 years. The guy really struggles with the fact that he, is 4-16. I believe it's 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. It kills him, and they've had opportunities and they haven't, pushed through those, but he wins 9-10 games. He should have been in the playoff in 2016, got robbed of that. And that was politics, and politics are going to get worse. We saw what happened at Florida State this year. Even if you move to 12, there's going to be a lot of political shuffling, which is good for teams like Nebraska who are in the Big Ten, because they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, as is the SEC. But James does a really good job. The problem they have is, they won a national title, or they won 2 national titles under Joe Paterno. They almost won one in '94, I believe it was. Nebraska actually won that year, beating Miami, but they were undefeated. Once you get that feeling, and Nebraska fans know this well, nothing but the title is good enough. Again, it's like a drug. You want that. And so that's what Penn State fans want. They just got to be careful. They could wish their way out of this guy, because he could get another job if you wanted to, anytime you wanted to. He's very marketable. But is 10-2 good enough? Is, a non-playoff? Now in 12 teams, it's not good enough. He has to make the playoff consistently. But I don't think he's going to win a national title there. The deck's stacked against him. That's also a difficult recruit. If you've ever been to State College,
yeah, it's hard to get to.
You have to take your life into your hands on one of those prop planes getting there, and you could 30-mile-an-hour winds, you get the plane turned around, you'd be like, I'm never coming here again. Or you get dropped there and there's 4 things to do in the entire area, and 3 of them are football related. So that's a tough place to recruit to as well. It's just, he's lucky he's got Philly on the east, he's got, Pittsburgh on the west. Nebraska doesn't have any of that. But, he does a really good job. I think he's a professional coach. Does he do better than expectations? No, because Penn State expectations are probably win 10 games every year, or 9 at minimum. I just think he's in a tough situation because everybody wants that national championship, and you got to be careful because the next guy that comes in now, I'll tie this in and scare the hell out of Nebraska fans if you want me to. It'd be fun. Because I love scaring people. There's a guy named Matt Rule who played at Penn State, who goes 7-5 this year. And James Franklin gets fed up with it all and said, "Listen, I'm tired of winning 10 games here. I'm out, going someplace else." Matt Rule's dream job is Penn State.
No.
Now, I'm not saying he would leave Nebraska for it, but that's the one place that I would be a little bit scared if I were, a Nebraska fan.
All right, let me get you out of here on this. Something or nothing when you're critiquing the Power 2 conferences at the end of the season. Well, you'll take into a fact it's coast to coast with such weather variance and time. Will that matter when you evaluate the level of play in the Big Ten Conference?
Yeah, it will. Obviously, the more you have to travel. I saw UCLA miles they have to travel this season. That's terrible. It's going to be really difficult. It just is, because college football, there's a turnaround. You play on a Saturday and you get back, now you gain the hours back, but that's not overly helpful. And you have to be ready to turn it around the next week. And there's going to be some times where they're going to not go back home. They're going to stay depending on scheduling. That's going to hurt these West Coast teams. They know it. They have no choice. They had to sign up for this, but it's definitely going to hurt them. I think Oregon has the plan for success recruiting wise and the right coach in place to be a national title contender. I don't think Washington does, and I certainly don't think USC is any place close. And UCLA is so far removed from being a playoff contender, it's ridiculous. So Oregon's the one I'd be scared about if I'm a Big Ten team, but the others right now I wouldn't be.
That's Mike Farrell, MikeFarrellSports.com. Mike, we appreciate you making an exception for us to join us on the radio.
Really appreciate it, Mike.
And maybe,
all right, guys.
Maybe we'll catch up after week 2. We'll see what happens.
All right, we'll talk to you.
Thanks.
That's Mike Farrell, MikeFarrellSports.com. We will be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, and we're brought to you by our friends at Union Omaha. Get to unionomaha.com for their upcoming match on Saturday, August 3rd, against Forward Madison FC. It's youth soccer night out at Werner Park, and it will be followed by Special Olympics Unified Series match presented by Leonard Management. Make sure you get your tickets at unionomaha.com. Really good stuff there from Mike.
It's definitely and for those that are used to, when he's big time at Rivals, and very strong opinions.
Yeah.
Right? Like, kind of matter of fact, as our listening audience found out during that interview.
I also really good stuff there.
But he's right, though. He barely does any radio.
Yeah, we appreciate him joining us for sure. I did have a disagreement with him.
I had a couple.
And for me, it was about the question I asked about Nebraska's recruiting ceiling. Because, first of all, I think we're already starting to see what a good recruiter can do at Nebraska. And we've seen it in the past, right? You can say whatever you want about the Mike Riley Calabrasca class, and I don't think he's wrong. But that was still a highly rated class. Now, I think they went after the wrong guys, right? And maybe you go after guys you have access to, whatever. I get it. But it showed at least the potential for Nebraska to recruit at a higher than top, 20 level. Obviously, Callahan was able to do that as well. And say what you will about that class, it also served as the basis for Bo's early success, right? Like a lot of those guys, there's a lot of overlap there in those
undeniable
08-09 Bo teams when he was, when it looked like things were back on the right track for Nebraska. So it is possible. We know this to be a fact. But I don't think you've ever had the overlap of a good recruiter and a good program at the same time at Nebraska in the recruiting era.
Especially from a development standpoint.
Yeah. And I think if you get that, you can recruit because Nebraska is a national brand. Like maybe you're not getting top 5 classes every year.
You know this is intentional, right? This is on the heels of the conversation we had with Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why? You know why it's important for him to brand Nebraska before they get good?
Yeah. So once they get good, the brand is already established.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can go out and get.
Wanted to make sure.
Oh, I get it.
He's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yes, he is doing the legwork now with the anticipation that the wins are coming.
You know you're gonna get idiots like Feinbaum that say what he said.
Yeah.
Right. But he does Pat McAfee and he does busting with the boys and people
and
like
Joel Klatt and whatever else.
The low hanging fruit is, you haven't even won yet. So what do you want him to do? Not go to work?
Yeah, you just want him to wait for it to happen.
It's like I always laugh, and this is the educator in me, where you get these files or these caseloads on kids, and you'd read it. And if you were worth your salt, you're like, hey, that was for them. Okay, I have a frame of reference. I know what I'm working with.
That's not your gospel.
It doesn't have to be the end. Like, why else do you coach? Like, do you want to be around any coaches that can only coach good players? No. There's enough of them out there.
Yeah.
So why? So he should just be like, oh man, you know what? We aren't very good. I shouldn't try to sell myself. Like, who does that?
Yeah, I should try and sell the program.
Right? Like, the guy walked into Waco and he could have easily wet the bed if he wanted to.
Yeah. I still don't even know why he walked into Waco, except for he's a sicko.
Well, remember, so the first questions we used to ask about him when he first got here was, why does he choose to run into burning buildings?
Yes. Why does he run into the fire?
It's just safe to say this is who he is now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because some people thrive in the heat. Like, that's the truth. Some people thrive when the temperature gets turned up.
He said something to me a couple of weeks ago that I've said indirectly a lot. Lincoln isn't for everybody. It comes with its inherent things that can get you if you come with some certain foibles. It just will.
Yeah.
And you can compare it to some other places in the country, but I think it is uniquely equipped to stumble you if you're not built a certain way. And it's across the board, whether it's the unwavering fan support, even if you don't win, that can make you lazy. The accessibility that people have to you in the rock star status, that can give you a false sense of security. Being paid well, whether you do your job well or not, can lend itself to bad habits. The amenities that come with it can lend itself to bad habits. The not having to pay for much or for people to do kind things for you because of your status, that can lend itself to bad habits, right? So
you better be pretty dialed in.
You have to be, because it's not for everybody. It's just like if you play here and you're from here. The scrutiny and it always being about the fans isn't for everybody. And that's
doesn't have to be for everybody.
But if you get somebody that wants to embrace that and dial in, they shouldn't have to apologize for it.
Yeah.
And I'm not, it's like, and I'll just use Feinbaum just because I couldn't. Number one, I hate when people seek counsel from less wise people.
Yeah.
So for Greenberg to defer to Feinbaum, I get it. It's their stick. But we let people off the hook for stupidity. No, sometimes you just need to say, you know what? That's pretty stupid.
Yeah, that wasn't very smart.
Like, maybe it's ratings, maybe it's for entertainment, but it's a credibility thing too. Like, you asked a guy that clearly doesn't know what he's talking about.
And doesn't know Big Ten football.
His opinion.
And doesn't know Nebraska.
So that was weird.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is why should Coach Rule succumb to championing the conference and wait until he gets good? Is it not as valued? And where do you draw the line? Like, Coach Ferentz has been blown out in Big Ten championship games. Should he not have a voice? Should he not be able to talk about competitive advantages and disadvantages with traveling the conference because he's been blown out twice?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right? Or even like you can take it to the extreme. Like
Day hasn't beat Michigan.
Yeah, I was going to say Ohio State.
So
is Ohio State not going to say anymore because they lost Michigan 3 years in a row?
It's like I don't know. I just don't.
And also, not to get off on the whole fine bomb thing, but he doesn't know what he was talking about because he brought up the NFL stuff.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? Also,
he arbitrarily picked it, but it's not the same thing that he used against Saban.
I was gonna say, yeah, let's bring up Saban's NFL record. Let's see how that went.
Which is good. I think he's 65 and 63, but he's had he's laid some eggs too.
It's fine. His NFL record is fine.
Or how about Pete Carroll Part 2 post
versus Part 1?
New England.
Yeah.
And the Jets versus Seattle.
Yeah.
Like, where do you draw the distinction of, well, it hasn't been this, so I shouldn't say anything at all? Like,
or just recognizing it's a different job.
What competitive alphas resign themselves to that?
Well, it's a different job. Like, it just doesn't even equate. The NFL and coaching in college football are just different jobs.
So back to the recruiting thing and where Nebraska could be.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it's important for him. He's giving himself a benchmark. I can't remember how you worded it last week, but he's saying some things out loud that you can hold him accountable for. And he's not afraid to say it.
I think that's exactly how I said it last week.
Because he believes in his ability.
Yeah, he 100% believes
I don't think anybody should ever, because it's not brash. He believes. And don't get it twisted. It's exactly how he recruits too. There are some local guys that know that he moved off of them because it turned into this tug of war that I need you to believe in me.
Yeah.
Hey, I need you to believe in us before we win. I'm telling you. Because, guys, here's the other end of that. You know how we get better? We need players like you guys.
Yeah. Right?
Right?
That's part of the equation.
You guys do realize that.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to say that or to move on. And occasionally you'll get some guys that'll pick up the phone and say, hey, I know I said this, this, and this. That wasn't on me. That was my parents. Can we get back in good? And then there are some other people that are like, hey, you know what?
Maybe that's not for me.
You're right. It wasn't for me. Two fish bowly. I need you guys to win first. And that's cool.
That's all right.
Catch you on the flip side. That's the same. I say he doesn't ask you to do anything he's not willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing he feels about the University of Nebraska. He's not being timid and saying, well, once we win X amount of games, I'm going to really feel good about this
program.
I can
market
No. I feel good about this program in the University of Nebraska right now, and we're not even good yet. Do you know why? It's because of this, and this. Like, it's all, I was going to say it's all part of the process. Not to go all Joker on you, but it is. Though.
Yeah.
Because it's like I said a year ago. Can you imagine if he wins, given his current skill set?
Yeah. That's why I don't think
he could recruit he would be a monster.
That's why I said, that's why I don't believe in the recruiting ceiling, because his skill set, if Nebraska's actually a good program,
he'd be a monster.
Is dangerous. We'll wrap up the show coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar exterior stage at the lovely Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Some comments on the YouTube channel. Ken says, I bet if you go back and rank the 90s classes, those were top 5 at worst. I don't know. It's tough because it's just
How'd you get the top quarterback out of Florida?
Yeah.
And Ben Roots was top 10.
Yeah.
Quarterback. LP was top 4.
Yep.
AG was 1.
Yep.
Calvin Jones was top 3 in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, I don't know.
And I usually try not to go back that far just because of how different the dynamics were of just the recruiting landscape. But it is a fair point that Nebraska has, when they've been successful, has recruited on a national level.
It's a team that has always recruited on the national level.
Yes, 100%. Like, that's how Nebraska's always operated. Do I think they're going to consistently be in the top 3 to 5? No, probably not. But top 10, 12?
Yeah.
I don't think that's if Nebraska's winning, I don't think that's out of the question by any stretch of the imagination. Because especially in today's climate, where Coach Rule is going to appear more and more and more different than everybody around him.
Don't think he doesn't know that.
Right? Because
he gave you the blueprint.
Yeah. Like he's
staying connected. Let's start a little cohesiveness.
And keeping groups together.
Keep folks together.
He said it at Big Ten Media Days. Keep the guys that get old and keep their teams together.
Yep.
He thinks they're going to be successful long term. We've already seen this play out in college basketball.
You should see he's constantly evaluating travel and accommodations and rest. Like, if you think he's not playing the long game outside of just, cover 2 versus an over-under front versus, 3 wide or duo, it's like.
Maybe I exaggerate this. I think, and I probably do, I think he thinks less about I think he thinks more about the dynamics of the program than he does the nitty gritty college football, like football on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, Will Compton and I were having a conversation off to the side. This was some months ago. And we were just walking in the parking lot. And he goes, he's like, DB. He goes, this guy is incredible. He doesn't miss a thing from the logistics, the day-to-day, the big picture, social media. Like, it's almost like, I don't know, he truly doesn't sleep. You know, what I tell you, one of the times he was unhappy with people trying to speculate on what he was going to do or come across in the media like they knew. He goes, you do realize we practice this day and this day and this day. Do you think I know what I want for the practice schedule tomorrow? I don't, because I have to think about it. I could give you the general times.
Yeah.
But if I don't know, how is somebody else going to tell me what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
You know, and I get
before he's made the decision.
But I get it though, right? You get enough odd texts or random call from overseas, or like, he's clearly always thinking about something, right? Like what? You don't have to read on the treadmill.
No, you can just put your headphones in and zone out for 20 minutes.
But he would ask you, what else should he be doing?
Yeah,
it's just
he's one of those.
I'm just telling you, like, if it works, it's exciting, because what you don't want to do is give a guy like that extra fuel.
Yeah. If you feed it at all,
he's already getting this thing in a positive direction without any real positive results on the football
There's
field.
zero proof of concept right now. None.
He ain't waiting.
Like, there's no proof of concept at all.
He's not waiting. You don't even get a guy on Sanders, like Sanders on campus, if you don't think that way.
Much less twice.
Because you have to be able to say, hey, man, some of these guys are waiting on us to win. Like, be first. Be first.
Like, what's Michael Terry even doing here?
Be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Be ahead of the game before everybody else can get in and say, oh, I knew it. No, he knows who felt like they knew it, and who is waiting.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably not going to hold it against you, but don't think those other guys aren't going to have a special place.
Well, I mean, I know Mike Farrell said Nebraska's not starting 7-0, and like, they probably aren't. I think they've got a schedule that lends itself to starting off well.
History says he's not. He just said it. Like, it's not wrong.
No, I agree. And I think their schedule sets up that they can start off very well. But let's say they start off 4-0, right? The guys that start clamoring to come in when they're 4-0, like, that's a different group of guys than the guys that committed in June.
Yeah, and those in
July.
Again, it's not that he's going to hold it against you, but he'll know if your energy's different.
I mean, listen,
he's just a loyal. Like,
we've all got different types of friends, right?
Yeah.
We've got our ride or dies, and then we got like, oh, that guy's cool, right? It's like, oh, I'll go hang out with that guy. And then you've got your, oh, I'm going to drive 15 hours over the course of 36 to go be there because his dad passed. Like, those are different levels of friendship, right? Like, that's kind of what we're talking about with these recruits, right? Not going to coach them any less, not going to love them any less, but there's different levels of, hey, when you're in and you're a ride or die, or you're a day one, that's different than it's like, oh yeah, we see each other, we're in the same group of friends, like, it's cool, right? Like, they're different relationships, and there's not a lot you can do to change that. And again, I think it'll be different with the guys that first commit after they start winning versus guys kind of down the road, because once that's the kind of like MO for the program, like, you can't really hold it against them, because it's like, well, everyone's come here now, right? But you feel differently about like the 92 class than you about the 94 class, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You feel differently about the 92 class you do the 95 class.
Yeah.
Right? The 97 class.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, three natties in 4 years. That's a lot of fun.
So Foreman and I will argue about the championship.
Yeah.
And what made that team different than, like, let's say, because I always told him they couldn't have beat our 93 team. And he and I will go back and forth.
You mean 97 couldn't have beat 93?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't even get into players specifically. I tell him it was easier then. Yeah. Like the groundwork was already laid.
You already poured the foundation.
Yeah.
It's easier to build the house.
Oh, and of course, just because he's very clever and he's kind of elusive, he ain't just letting that sit. He's gonna give it back to ODB. But like that's ultimately what I come back to. I'm like, I mean, you're just doing like enhancements.
Yeah.
You ain't laying no.
It's flipping the house from building it from the ground up.
Yeah, you're just trying to decide if you want to go from marble to granite. We had to put the countertop in.
we had to run the plumbing, like that's a.
By the way, how great is he, Andy?
Just got off doing his own thing.
Dude is like,
you ain't doing nothing up in here. You better.
That's my guy.
I saw him. I don't think I interacted with him because I was just trying to stay above water, man.
Yeah. I love that dude. But it's just like, I don't know. Part of the reason that I really, he's like he'd be a good life coach, let alone a football coach.
Mm-hmm. That's why I say I don't like, and that's not to say he doesn't think about football, but that's why I think he thinks about the program more than football, right? He trusts his assistants to do their job, and their job is football.
Yeah.
Right? First and foremost, they got other stuff to do, but their job's football. His job, and I think this is a thing that we've missed with a lot of coaches, right? Nebraska is a CEO job. It has to be. It's too.
I think we debated that out loud, and we were afraid to take hardline stances.
It's too big not to be.
Yeah.
That's why Frost failed. It's not because Frost doesn't know football.
Yeah.
Like we can say that out loud now, right? We can say that like Scott Frost is a good offensive mind. He knows what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. The rest of it was too big. Like that wasn't his skill set, and he definitely couldn't do both. Right? Bo Pelini, great defensive mind, terrible CEO. Right? Bill Callahan, great offensive mind, great offensive line coach, wasn't up for what the job was. Like that's a thing. There's not a ton of programs like that. Texas is like this. You think Mac Brown is the best football mind Texas has ever had? No. Guess what he was?
He's a great CEO.
He was the best CEO they've ever had.
Yeah.
He was running for governor the entire time he was there, basically. That's what some of these jobs are. And like if you understand that and that's your skill set, you're going to be in a much better spot than if you're a football junkie and you can't do the rest of it.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head last week when we were talking about like the face of a program versus I love the analogy that you talked about on the heels of where you could just be a football coach versus having to be the CEO type. Because that's about right. Early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for Coach Solich, right about in the middle of his tenure.
Yeah.
Because that's a guy that just wanted to coach football. Right? Probably, I mean, that's why Ohio was a good fit for him. He just wanted to coach football.
You know the equivalent?
What?
Is guys that get into high school coaching just to coach and realize that they have to be in the building too.
Yeah.
It's hard for some coaches to balance.
That's why I only
like, wait a minute, what do you
That's why I only coached high school basketball for a year.
You know what came with it?
Getting the F out of that building, brother. Not happening. That is your show for a Monday. DB and I will be back tomorrow. Guys, it's August this week. Football season is right around the corner. Can't wait. Hope you join us tomorrow on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.